Story time!
Story time! Story time!
Story time! Story time!
Itch! Hello, folks, and happy Thursday to everyone. My name's Timothy Vilgiate,
And I'm Christopher Fox.
and you're listening to Two Lies and One Truth.
A new storytelling podcast on UCCS Radio.
On this show, we bring you 3 stories. Only one of them is true, and it's up to you to decide which one it is.
Not that we'll tell you.
Of course not.
That would be ridiculous.
This isn't Soviet Russia or something. It's America. You have to work for it.
The theme of this episode is rescues. The first one is by myself, Christopher Fox, performed by Jareth Spirio, and produced by TImmy. It's the story of either a homeless guy on acid hiding in a bush, or a real encounter with God.
You decide. Music in this episode is written and recorded by me, Timothy Vilgiate. If you'd like to submit a story or your music to the podcast, just let us know on our Facebook, 2 Truths and 1 Lie.
I have a cat penis. Or had a cat penis. Not so much as has, have, or had, more I was in possession of a cat penis. It wasn't mine, but it helped me out a lot. Okay, now this isn't one of those gender reversal stories or species reversal. I'm not a cat, I'm just a kid. A kid trying to get through high school. Some people don't have any trouble getting through high school, but there are some of us that have bullies. For whatever reason, my bullies needed to hurt or pick on kids like me. So, I got a cat penis. Okay, well, I didn't get the cat penis. It was given to me. You don't accept something like a cat penis from a stranger without a good cause, and I figured I had a pretty good cause at the time. I never asked the stranger where he got it. He just said it would keep them away from me. He? Maybe she? I don't know. The person gave me a cat penis. He gave it to me not too far into my freshman year. I guess freshman year is when, high school can break you. Do something bad enough, you're stuck in it for 4 years. That seemed pretty scary to myself, so I chose not to do anything. The thing about not doing anything is it's not possible. People take notice and start messing with you, testing the water. And at first it wasn't anything bad, just pushing and minor name calling. It might not have progressed, but I fed into it. I fed the trolls. And the bullying started to get worse. They would punch me, take my stuff. I don't know how an addict feels, but I know the feeling of hiding yourself. Taking different hallways just to not get harassed. Spending too much time in the principal's office with a group of kids waiting on the soccer field would get bored and go home. That all changed, though. They don't do that anymore. No one really gets close. All because of the cat penis. Or all because of the stranger. Never saw the stranger again, but this is how it all happened. I'm just walking one day, and the usual herd of kids comes down and shoves me, and I offer no resistance, and I've offered no resistance for some time. I guess I'm an easy target. No real creativity was allowed in these kids' minds for anything they tried. It was just bare barbarism. Every day was the same. No matter what route I would take home, these kids would find me. It was like I had an aura or something they just felt. Maybe they followed me, or one of them did. It's weird. Picking myself up in the usual manner, I heard a voice not too far off to my right. I braced for the kick or the punch that usually follows, but I didn't even hear what the voice said. It's just easier in those situations to block everything out. Hey, kid! I thought I heard something that time, like someone beckoned me. Turning around, I could find nobody present, and I heard it again. I know I heard the voice because I was listening. I wasn't blocking out sensory information anymore. I was curious. Hey, kid! I spun around again, and I could not place the voice in any recognizable space. Scared, like really scared, I stammered out the only words that came to my mind. God? Is that you? A snicker erupted as the voice followed. I've often thought that of myself. But no, I'm over here in the bushes. Sure enough, I could make out a faint figure outline in the bushes not far away. Hesitantly, I walked over. I never met God before. I wasn't really sure what to do or what to say, how to act, but I knew that I just had to be there and talk to that figure in the bush. I got something for your kid. It'll help you out. Snickers erupted now whenever the voice spoke. It was a comforting sound because it made God sound more human. Like it had a sense of humor. It was disarming for myself to hear, and, it's just nice to hear the laughter. Like laughter for actual happiness in the world. Closing the gap, the laughter became almost uncontrollable for the bush. I had to join in. We stayed there for a moment, and I think both recognizing how joyous the occasion was. What do you have for me, God? Will it make the bullies go away? We stayed in a moment of laughter a while longer after the question. God, there in the bush, wanted to say yes, that it did have something. This is how the prophets must have felt. Like pure happiness and elation, laughing with God.
I got something for you right here, kid.
A long, dirty arm extended from the bush. It had something furry. The ethereal arm broke a barrier, because a smell not noticed before began to waft my nose. The hand called for me to take the furry item. Forgetting the nauseous smell or even my surroundings, I asked with pure joy and elation, "This will get rid of those bullies, God?" We both broke into another long laughter, before God told me it would. He was sure it would. That's all I needed to hear. I ran right after those bullies. Then and there, I wanted this all to end. Running and racing in the direction those bullies headed to, I started to see them. My lungs burned, but I was determined. The furry member firmly in my grasp. I screamed to them, a scream that stopped the kids in their tracks. I ran to them and held the furry object right for them to see. They paused in astonishment. Recognizing the courage in me to stand up to them, I think they feared me. They must have felt the change in my aura because I spoke to God.
Gross!
Ew, is that a penis?
Stay away from us, you...
It was working. This furry object held in my hand was working. I confidently showed it to them more and walked closer to them, half crazed, half zombie walking towards my bullies with a gift from God, and it was working.
What's he doing?
Do you think he's on meth?
No, dude, let's just get out of here.
As I stood there, watching them run away, run back home, away from the power of God, I attended church every Sunday after that day. I even went to the weekday services that nobody knows about. I'd often go back to that bush and just sit with the gift, and hope a conversation would happen again. It never did, though, but the bullies never messed with me again. No one did, really. The charm worked so well that nobody wanted anything to do with me. My entire plan worked after all. I survived the 4 years of high school without any incidents. Because when God has your back, you can do anything. Or I guess if you just believe it. I stopped carrying around the cat penis after I figured out the stranger was probably just a homeless man tripping on acid. It didn't matter, though. None of the kids wanted anything to do with me. 4 years clear because I did something right once. Once is all you need if you're crazy enough. Sometimes you just need to hold something crazy in your hands for reality to clear away. Sometimes you need a lucky charm to get out of a bad situation. Even if it's a cat penis.
I see the crack in its armor. I see the faults in my own. I see the specks in your eyelids, and my own love is overgrown.
Is that a true story?
Is that a trick question? I remember you saying this is America.
Good job. That story was written by Christopher Fox, read by Jareth Spirio, and produced by me, Timothy Vilgiate. Next up, we take you to a remote hillside, where a young man running away from home is rescued by an unexpected visitor. The majestic and regal-looking beast rose its head from up behind the boulders on top of the hill, its gentle and strong eyes surveying the land and horizon around with a calm and undisturbed disposition. Its fur was the color of speckled pavement peering through a mass of freshly fallen snow, its mane rippling like those little wispy clouds you see in the sky right before a rainstorm. Around them the city stretched on, crashing in waves of cement against the edges of a city park. It was just before nightfall, and the sun was going down over the hills. The creature drifted up the rough terrain, eclipsing briefly the bright orange trails of light that shot up from behind the mountains.
Asshole.
Mumbled the young man on top of the hill to the horse, a nearly empty bottle of vodka dangling from between his fingers.
This is my spot, you little...
His words trailed off into an indecipherable pablum. Admittedly, though, I'll concede it was a pretty stupid horse. Awestruck by its beauty and mystery as one could be. What the hell? Stupid horse. The horse brayed, sniffing in the air as it attempted to identify the stranger, eventually deciding, somehow, that the human was not a threat. The fellow, laying down at his side underneath the crevice of a boulder, took a small sip of the vodka bottle in his hand, coughing. Around him were scattered a few beer cans, packs of cigarettes, ripped blankets, and the threads of a tarp. It had only been 2 days. 2 days since they kicked him out. There wasn't anywhere to go, not to Peter's, not to Joe's house. Neither of them knew. But at least he could get his hands on some liquor. An older man told him that this spot was safe. No one came to this part of the park this late. People from the suburbs love nature, but not too much nature, and especially not in the dark. The man showed him a few things, most importantly, perhaps, how to find a place to sleep, how to set up camp, how to not be seen. But even if he was seen, and he probably would be, no one would give him trouble unless he was disturbing someone. So long as he kept to his rock and waited, it would be okay. The horse stumbled forward and shook off its head, coming closer to the young man underneath the rock.
What the hell do you want?
He mumbled. The horse stared blankly at him, turning its head in that pretentious, dumbass way that the horses do, studying him with his deep black eyes. Irritated, the boy screwed the top back onto his bottle.
Are you a cop?
The horse, being a horse, didn't respond.
You like one of those smeller cop horses? Can drag people down or something?
The horse bent down to eat a small piece of grass, the only clump of it at the top of the hill. The man winced with confusion, holding up his hand.
The hell? The hell?
Angrily, he yanked the tarp over his head, trying to fall asleep, as uncomfortable and terrified as he was. The young man had class on Monday morning. Tomorrow, that is. He had enough money in his bank account to buy a cup of coffee. Then he could walk to the parking lot, take the shuttle to the rec center, take a shower there, and hopefully not look like he'd spent his entire weekend like
Yeah.
this.
You hear that,
He
Melky?
tried.
You hear that,
to hide his
Melky?
fear, but he was terrified. Every crack of a twig, every time he heard a rock slip down the hillside, his eyes shot open, in spite of the drunken stupor he found constantly trying to drag him back into slumber. So, of course, there was this goddamn horse, apparently just going to watch him sleep or something. He peeked out from under the tarp. It had eaten the only grass that was on the hill, and now was staring at the young man's tarp with this vacant, confused look on its face. Get a clue, loser. He dozed off for a moment and started to dream. In his dream, he was in his summer camp bunk bed when a tall, muscular man burst through the door and strode to his bed, ripping off the blankets. Get up! Get your stuff! We're leaving! He whispered. Frantically, the young man pulled up his pajama pants and pulled his backpack up over his shoulders. All of his clothes fell to the ground, just leaking tar up through the floorboards. The man who had come to rescue him groaned with frustration. Pick it up! Hurry, we don't have much time! He knelt down and helped the young man put all of his clothes into the backpack, peeling them from off the floor. They dripped with thick, molasses-like liquid which smelled wretched. Disgusted, the young man fumbled with the zipper to seal off the bag, and before he could sling the pack over his shoulder, a firm hand grabbed him by the arm and pulled him up, almost dragging him towards the door. The young man studied his rescuer's firm, well-sculpted arms, his chest as he pulled him along. He liked wherever the stream was going. He released his arm briefly as he got to the door, twisting the doorknob cautiously and hushing the young man. Heart racing with anticipation, his rescuer breathed deeply and shut his eyes, waiting for the door to open. Outside, waiting for them, was... God damn it. It was that frickin' horse. Of course it was. Of course that frickin' horse would be waiting there. He jolted awake. The horse had gotten closer, and it was staring at him. It was probably telepathic or something, he imagined, and it could tell he was having a dream. Just had to go screw it up.
I was about to get laid, you asshole.
The horse brayed indifferently.
Can you just leave me alone?
Again, oblivious as hell, the horse inched closer, leaning down and sticking out its tongue. The disgusting, slobbering, red thing contorted and twisted as it neared his face, making him recoil back into his cave.
Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. Stop it! Stop it! I hate you.
He shoved the horse's face away and got up, wiping off his face. What the hell? Can't you take a hint? The horse whinnied, unperturbed.
I don't have any food. Go away.
He tried to push the horse's head back. It did not move, only looking on, somewhat confused and only moderately annoyed.
God, can you take a hint?
He went around to the side of the horse, stumbling over some rocks, and tried to push against the horse's side.
Go away!
He shouted, somewhat louder this time. Milky! Milky! The horse looked off towards the sound of a distant voice. Here, boy! Here! The young man slapped the horse's shoulder. He pushed harder against the horse, which again continued to remain completely indifferent. Milky? Is that you?
Yeah, Milky, you piece of shit! Is that you? Oh, Milky!
The horse reached back and bit him lightly on his arm. He screamed out in pain.
Ah! Fuck you! Fuck you, you stupid majestic ass horse!
That was the last thing he remembered. That stupid horse, with its smug, pretentious little face. Everything started to go black when he tried to remember what had happened next. He woke up in a cell, his head pounding. But somehow there was a sense of relief. Not because he was safe. Not because he might be able to stay there in prison for a few extra days. Not because maybe the police might be able to help. Mostly, actually, he was just relieved that he didn't have to look at that damn horse.
Maybe you were high then, the first time we met. Maybe you'd had a bad day, and it was all just in my head. Can't get enough proof to believe you exist. I can't get enough truth to realize I'm full of shit. Soon enough I know that I'll have to prove you wrong. Soon enough you'll look at me and you'll realize I'm a fraud. I'm a fraud. I'm a fraud. I'm a fraud.
Also, the subtext is that he's like a freshman. He's running away from home because his parents like had sent him to conversion therapy before and it didn't work. And he's running away
because I was gay.
Because it is, and that's why he's at the summer camp. The summer camp's a conversion therapy.
Got you.
Yeah, it's supposed to be real. It's dark, but only if you look at it that. If you only realize that the summer camp is supposed to be conversion therapy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That story was written by TImmy Vilgiate and performed by TImmy Vilgiate.
No horses were harmed in the making of this story.
Or were they?
Or were they indeed? Anyway, this last story actually doesn't tell a story, but instead tells the story of telling a story. It's written by me, read by me, produced by Christopher Fox.
I heard someone say on NPR, my lying fake news liberal elitist station of choice for long drives from my home to the south of town, that we need to tell stories as humans. Telling the story of an experience is not only cathartic but necessary. The same thing in drama class. So similar, I might be confusing the two. Theater arose from mankind's need to tell stories, they said. But this isn't my story to tell. Not completely. I haven't talked to the story's other owner for a little more than a year. And so telling her side of this story, well, that's something I can't do. But I've thought about the story more than a few times since I spoke to her last. That was a day sometime in the spring when I remembered that she had a pile of things I'd written, and I decided I wanted them all back. I told her so in a Facebook message 3 months before last contact. Her sister brought them by work. They arrived in a disarrayed folder filled with old writing and scraps of paper. I glanced at it once and then put it away for good. If my high school drama teacher and the liberal elite of NPR are to be believed, I need to tell this story, though, even if it's not completely mine, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't agree deep down with the story's inherent need to be told. But of all those times that have made me glance back in hindsight, I think, perhaps that is the real part of my story. The flesh of the moment belongs to her, but the spirit departing from the dust, scattered out on the floors and lining the curtain rods of 1,000 different corridors and places, that is mine. And so in telling you what little I can complete the story, one which I feel, even as I write, is largely untellable, by telling you about the times I remembered it. The presence of that moment is told best in its past and its future. We came to her house at night, a big house out near the forest, and entered. Immediately, her dad, already in a bad mood and drunk, began to lecture us about installing Windows 10. He wanted it installed. It was going to be installed. A pop-up would appear, and if we chose to not install Windows 10 at the beckoning of the pop-up, he would be very upset. The explanation lasted 15 minutes. She fired back at him, he fired back at her. I nodded calmly in the hopes that it would stop at some point. But I didn't want to be here. They said they weren't going back, but only a few days passed before they changed their minds and returned. A series of grand departures had occurred since that one. I'd started staying over sometimes and sleeping downstairs, since it seemed like having an outsider in the house put him on guard. I stayed at a very old apartment building somewhere very far away once, a year or so later, in a room on the 6th floor. Bear with me. Every morning, I had to take an elevator. I'd been afraid of elevators until only very recently, but this old rickety machine had me very much on edge. One day I climbed in, and together with about 4 other people from higher floors of the building. The elevator shaked and shimmied downwards from the immense weight, but I tried to remain calm. Floor 3. Ding! Another person entered, and we were all heading to the same floor. The elevator inched downwards again, nearing the ground level before it lurched to a stop. My heart started pounding. The other inhabitants groaned. This stupid elevator breaking down again. The power went out next. We were not only trapped, but in the dark with a crowd of strangers. I'd been afraid of this since the moment I stepped into an elevator, and now it was happening.
Somehow, my only thought at the moment between the restrained surges of terror was that I'd be late for a meeting, but in retrospect, I thought it strange how this moment of utter terror for me was routine inconvenience for the people who lived here. I imagined it was scary at first when the elevator began to drop and when the power would trap them inside, but it was normal. I took the stairs from then on. Her dad had cornered me in the kitchen, locked in conversation. He was angry about God, angry about his family. I tried to counter what he said, some of which I knew he'd say, drawing upon every ounce of memory that I had from years of church and counseling and reading. But every so often, she would shout at him from the couch, and what little peace I had managed to foster would disintegrate. A phone call occurred. He pulled away slowly and went to the garage. I'd heard enough stories now to know that we needed to run. I didn't know how I'd done it, but I'd kept him at bay, reciting vague facts about the grace of God, about the possibility of change, about the hope that could be had for the future. But as we pulled away from the driveway, I looked over to my friend and muttered, "Let's hope this is the last time either of us have to see this place." She grimaced. It was doubtful. I was with my girlfriend the next summer driving home underneath the bridge I used to take to get to my old friend's house. My girlfriend was at the wheel. We'd had a great time spending the night in another city and visiting an art museum. I was holding her hand and looking out the window. All at once, the memory came back to me and I could see that the roles were reversed. I was being rescued. I feared for a moment that this was the sort of twist of fate where I, having betrayed the trust of my friend, was to live through the same trials as she had. I held on to her hand, and it seemed surreal. Out of the daylight, the skies filled with nighttime, and we were once again hurtling to a distant place. To remember it made me feel ashamed. Here I was, and the memory had not yet faded. I'd imagined that I loved my friend, but it was driven mostly by the terror that the two of us had shared, mired with an underlying sense of pity. And I wondered if it was the same thing. If I was being pitied or loved. My friend became a different person around her reunited family. Together, they huddled outside of a hotel, trying to decide what to do. One of them wanted to go back home. The other wasn't sure. We heard a car backfire and they thought it was a gunshot. Mass panic arose. It was unclear why this would be the panic that would have them moving. And listen to them talk, debating whether or not they should return, who was really to blame for what, asking me what I'd said, what he'd said. I looked over at my friend, and I knew that the secret I was keeping couldn't be kept. That I hadn't rescued her by driving. The only way that this story would have a happy ending would be if I broke the promises that I'd kept. And so I called the police. About a year too late. They asked how on earth I knew this person, if they were an ex-girlfriend or something. They weren't. But I felt like we never been completely friends in the pure sense. I was expected over the phone to distill the enigma of what had happened to a complete stranger, and I did so relatively easily, if incompletely. They were very skeptical, seeming disinterested in investigating the evidence I brought forward. But I remained hopeful that they would until a few days afterwards when I received no call, no email. He probably wouldn't investigate it. But he'd reached out to the mother and the two daughters, he said, and he'd call me if he needed my evidence. And that call never happened. But I'd broken the last of my promises. The next day, me and my friend were back at the house, and it was like nothing had ever happened. A bouquet of flowers was left on the counter. The conversation with her dad was shy, embarrassed, but evasive. The drive had never happened. The rescue had never happened. The story had never existed. It would never be told. Even now in writing it, I feel a guilt come over me when I think that I am telling a story that perhaps one of them will hear it, and it will create a scandal or an argument, but I also write it knowing that I did all I could, in whatever way I knew how. I learned, if nothing else, to be taken aback by my own promises. Not to say, I'll keep a secret if I know there's going to be a caveat. If I know my reliability has to have a kill switch. If I know that the basic substance of the promise is wrong in itself. That you shouldn't promise to cover up child abuse or any of the other things that I knew about. I called the police, and in a way I'd done the right thing, but I'd done the right thing in the worst way I could. But taking the stairs had been the right thing to do when the elevator was broken down and no one was going to fix it. The promises had meant enough that it was difficult to break them, even if it should have been impossible. I knew now the difference between love and pity. But now it was over, and I've told the story. Well, that's all, folks. Tune in next week on March 23rd for stories of love and romance, including stories by me, John Latham, and Wesley.
The week after that, March 30th, we'll tell you some stories of trips.
What kind of trips, Chris?
Responsible trips, like to the store.
Gotcha. Well, until next time, folks, hope you have a great night.
Special thanks to Jareth Spirio and the UCCS Writers Guild, as well as TImmy Vilgiate.
Thanks, Chris.
That's it. Did you say it that time?
Minutes ago, I saw you for the first time, and that was all I needed. All I needed to decide. I told myself you'd go and disappear. It would be the last time I'd ever see you here. I still remember your smile. By night time I'd forgotten your name. I've got a dozen unfinished love songs just for you. Got at least 100 stories I can end with you. Got 100,000 seconds I can spend with you. And if only I remember your name. If only I remember your name. One week after that, you stopped by and said hello. I thought you looked familiar. I tried to remember who you were. Soon enough it all came back, and I realized we'd already met. I asked for your name again, and you told me, but somehow I still forgot. I've got a dozen unfinished love songs just for you. Got at least 100 stories I can end with you. Got 100,000 seconds I can spend with you. And if only I remember your name. If only I remember your name. The next week I was heading to class. I was just a little bit high. I saw you there on the couch, and I couldn't let you pass me by. We talked the whole week through. I realized that you could be the one. I loved every single thing that you said to me, but no, I didn't know your name. But no, I didn't know your name. But no, I didn't know